You bow to their verdicts, heed their fatwas, and honor their scholarship. Yet who holds these scholars themselves accountable? In an age when imams seem as distant as the cosmos they interpret, the ʿulamāʼ stand as both gatekeepers of divine wisdom and potential masters of your mind. But what happens when their authority slips from guidance into dogma, from interpretation into imposition? I'm Fakir al-Khamosh. Over this series, we'll pry open the sacred seminaries and the hushed chambers of religious councils to ask, do today's scholars reflect the Quran's spirit of mercy, or have they become architects of power? Are they shepherds or wardens of the Ummah's conscience? Brace yourself. This is a reckoning with the living legacy of the ulama. Centuries ago, knowledge flowed from humble madrasa classrooms. Today, charismatic ulama oversee global satellite networks, star-studded conferences, and best-selling books. Their reach extends far beyond dusty lecture halls. Every tweet, every YouTube sermon molds beliefs across continents. Once regarded as community advisors, many scholars now hold official titles: state-appointed muftis, heads of Islamic banks, members of constitutional councils. With government salaries and diplomatic immunity, their fatwas carry the weight of law. But how free can a scholar be when patronage binds his pen? Religious certificates, ijazas, ijma endorsements have become branded credentials, sold through online courses and weekend seminars. Students chase them like diplomas, hoping to acquire authority rather than mastery. When knowledge is a product, who ensures its integrity? The Prophet taught that ʿilm comes through hunger for truth, not hunger for prestige. Yet today, the pursuit of recognition too often overshadows the pursuit of understanding. We must ask, are our scholars serving God's inquiry or safeguarding their own influence? In the pre-digital era, consensus, ijma, among qualified ulama grounded a fatwa's authority. Today, legitimacy is wielded through flashy live polls, trending hashtags, and celebrity endorsements. But can the click of a thumbs up replace centuries of rigorous debate? Let's expose the new legitimacy machines and question whether their verdicts spring from conviction or clicks. Ijma's weight. Historically, a fatwa gained binding force when the entire scholarly body of a region agreed, months or years after meticulous discourse. This slow burn ensured depth, not popularity. Instant validation. Now, a prominent sheikh hosts a live vote. Should women lead prayer? Thousands click yes or no in minutes. The result splashes across feeds as the community's verdict, yet depth gives way to data, nuance to numbers. Government fatwa boards. Ministries convene official councils to issue binding edicts, sometimes aligning with political goals more than theological rigor. When the state controls the council agenda, shura risks becoming a stamp of approval, not a forum for genuine consultation. Visibility over validity. Televised council sessions project transparency, yet dissenting voices are seldom heard. Dissenters whisper online, but the official televised shura remains a choreographed display of unity, not a battlefield of ideas. Social media sermons. Young preachers with polished production teams deliver concise verdicts. 5 things Islam says about X, amassing millions of followers. Their rapid-fire style values shareability over scholarship, turning faith into snackable content. Brand ambassadors. When influencers partner with halal brands or state campaigns, their fatwas blur into marketing, endorsements that sell products as much as religious guidance. True scholarly authority grows from distance, time to reflect, to debate in private chambers, to wrestle with nuance. When visibility becomes the measure of legitimacy, we risk elevating rhetoricians over researchers, popularity over profundity. The ʿulamāʼ may gain followers, but do they keep the soul in sight? Your life's decisions, what you eat, how you vote, whom you marry, often hinge on a fatwa scribbled in a dimly lit chamber. But when every question must pass through a clerical filter, does scholarship safeguard the faithful, or does it gatekeep moral agency? Today, we dissect the dynamics between ulama and laity and ask, who truly holds sway over heart and conscience? Exclusive access. Entry into advanced religious studies often requires lineage, connections, or patronage. Seminaries function as closed guilds. Newcomers stumble through dense curricula, while insiders fast-track to ijaza. This hierarchy preserves prestige but limits diverse voices. Social sanctions. Public defiance of a scholar's ruling can lead to ostracism, mosque exile, social gossip, even threats. Such sanctions enforce doctrinal uniformity, yet they risk punishing sincere seekers who raise uncomfortable questions. Paid consultations. Some scholars monetize their ʿilm, charging fees for private advisories. When spiritual guidance becomes transactional, affordability rather than expertise can determine whose voice is heard and whose remains silent. Authority ideally empowers the individual to discern truth. When it becomes gatekeeping, faith becomes dependent, not flourishing. The question stands, can ulama guide without guarding, open paths without closing others? Behind every fatwa lies a financial lifeline. Seminaries subsist on donations, scholars travel on sponsored pilgrimages, institutions issue lucrative religious certificates. But when money flows into these channels unchecked, who banks on whose authority? Today we'll map the shadow economy of the ulama, from discreet patronage networks to commercial enterprises, exposing how financial interests shape, and sometimes shackle, the voices meant to guide us. Waqf foundations. Historically, charitable endowments funded madrasas, hospitals, and water fountains. Today, large family trusts and international foundations establish waqfs that bankroll scholar salaries, building maintenance, and outreach programs. While noble in origin, these endowments can come with strings attached. Major donors often expect influence over curricula, lecturer appointments, and public stances on hot-button issues. Political backing. Governments, especially in Gulf states, provide annual stipends to appointed grand muftis. These stipends, tied to official loyalty, incentivize scholars to align verdicts with state policy. Academics who deviate risk losing not only income but also their institutional platform and visas. Paid ijaza programs. Beyond traditional mastery, many seminaries now offer weekend certificate courses at premium prices, promising authorization to teach or issue fatwas. These programs blend in-person workshops, online modules, and guest lectures by celebrity sheikhs, with fees that can exceed thousands of dollars. Students buy credentials as much as knowledge, and institutions profit handsomely, sometimes more than they invest back into scholarly research. Publishing arms. Top scholars often control in-house publishing houses, releasing bestsellers on theology, jurisprudence, and self-help. Royalties funnel back into personal and institutional coffers. While these works spread religious ideas widely, they also turn interpretation into a brand, where marketability can trump methodological rigor. Hajj and Umrah diplomacy. Prestigious scholars receive all expenses-paid pilgrimages, luxury accommodations, and generous honoraria to speak at state-sponsored gatherings. These spiritual tourism arrangements enhance their status, but risk creating a class of globe-trotting clerics more attentive to sponsor expectations than grassroots needs. International summits. From UN-side events on Islamic finance to NGO-led forums on countering extremism, ʿulamāʼ headline conferences for sizable appearance fees. While they provide global exposure, the risk is clear. Speakers may temper or tailor their messages to suit hosts, governments or corporations eager for religious endorsement. Television channels. Several scholars helm satellite networks broadcasting 24/7 lectures, call-in shows, and documentary series. Ad revenue, sponsorship deals, and viewer donations sustain these channels. Yet dependence on ratings can push programming toward sensational topics, controversial fatwas, moral policing, to boost viewership and revenue, diluting the solemnity of scholarship. Social media monetization. Influencer-style clerics partner with halal brands for sponsored posts, from ethical fashion lines to tech gadgets promising halal-certified usage. Each endorsement blurs the line between religious guidance and advertising, raising ethical questions about conflicts of interest. Does a sheikh denounce a product or defend it if it pays his salary? Money is a test of integrity. When scholars depend on patron funding, their independence comes under threat. Each donation, each ticket sale, each sponsorship meeting poses this choice. Serve the divine mandate or secure the next paycheck? True authority emerges where fiscal ties are transparent, accountability is public, and the scholar remains servant to the sacred text, not captive to the lucrative contract. In a world where scholars dine at palace tables and preach on billion-dollar networks, the laity's voice often echoes unheard. But true authority thrives on accountability. When communities organize to question fatwas, audit seminaries, and demand transparency, they reclaim the sacred contract between scholar and believer. Today, we explore how citizen-led oversight can break the chains of hidden patronage and restore ʿulamāʼ as genuine servants of faith, without prescribing blueprints, but by provoking the questions every believer must ask. Neighborhood accountability groups. Imagine small circles in local mosques or community centers where laypeople, shopkeepers, teachers, students meet scholars for open Q&A. They record fatwas, compare differing opinions, and publish summaries online. This collective memory forces scholars to justify their positions publicly, discouraging capricious or self-serving rulings. Penetrating the ivory tower. Such circles bridge the chasm between ivory tower scholarship and lived experience. When an imam offers a verdict on inheritance or marriage, he faces direct questions. How does this align with our community's realities? Personal stories and lived contexts become weapons against abstract decrees detached from human need. Public fatwa repositories. Community-managed platforms compile every fatwa issued by local scholars, complete with author, date, source texts, cited, and dissenting views. Lay researchers annotate rulings with case studies, demonstrating, for instance, how a zakat fatwa affects families in poverty. Visibility turns each ruling from secret decree into shared resource. Open sittings. Periodic court-like sessions in public halls invite scholars to debate contentious issues live, with access to full transcripts and video archives. The audience votes on which arguments resonate most, not to override the scholar's expertise, but to illuminate which reasoning connects with communal values. Financial disclosures. Scholars voluntarily publish yearly income sources, honoraria, waqf stipends, book royalties. When a ruling aligns suspiciously with a donor's interests, the community can call for clarification. This radical candor shocks complacency, reminding scholars their primary patron is the divine trust, not the deepest pocket. Patron pledges. Major donors sign non-interference agreements pledging not to influence research topics or verdicts. While unenforceable legally, public signing ceremonies and social pressure uphold the moral binding of these pledges. Cross-seminary councils. Scholars from different institutions form rotating committees that review each other's curricula, teaching methods, and publication standards. Lay ambassadors observe proceedings, ensuring panels examine not only doctrinal correctness, but also relevance, inclusivity, and respect for diversity of madahib. External audits. Independent experts, historians, linguists, ethicists, are invited to assess seminary syllabi for outdated content, bias, or gaps in critical thinking training. Their findings, published alongside responses from ʿulamāʼ, foster a culture where scholarship is continuously refined, not stagnated. Interactive apps. Smartphone platforms allow believers to submit questions, rate clarity and compassion of responses, and flag ambiguous or contradictory rulings. Machine learning analysis highlights recurring concerns, say women's rights or financial ethics, prompting scholars to address these topics directly in future lectures. Transparency dashboards. Community representatives track metrics, average response time to queries, number of dissenting opinions published, percentage of rulings cited with full scriptural sources. When dashboards dip below benchmarks, questions arise in oversight circles, spurring remedial actions. Authority is not a license to obscure. The divine injunction to enjoin the good and forbid the evil presumes public reasoning, not secret edicts. When the ʿulamāʼ surrender transparency, they invert the prophetic model, making faith an elite privilege instead of a shared quest. Communities must remember, a scholar's greatness lies not in unchallenged decree, but in humble, open discourse that uplifts every conscience. In a fracturing world, the call for universal ethics rings urgent. When ʿulamāʼ confine themselves to sectarian silos, they echo the very partisanship they decry. Yet when they cross confession and culture to convene in global networks, debating climate justice, human rights, pandemic response, they revive the prophetic vision of scholars united in service of humanity. But can these transnational assemblies escape tokenism, bureaucratic inertia, or geopolitical influence? Let's chart the promise and peril of interfaith and global ʿulamāʼ fora, spaces where the Quran's moral imperatives meet the world's urgent crises. Early encounters. Muslim scholars in medieval Andalusia engaged in spirited dialogues with Jewish and Christian counterparts, debating metaphysics in Córdoba's synagogues and Toledo's translation schools. Their method prized mutual respect and rigorous debate, planting seeds for today's interreligious academies. Modern foundations, post-World War II initiatives, the 1947 Amen Message, the 1985 Parliament of the World's Religions, invited ʿulamāʼ into multi-faith gatherings. Their aim: reclaim Islam's pluralistic heritage and forge consensus on shared values. Yet these early attempts often prioritized optics over outcomes, risking superficial concord rather than substantial collaboration. The Dubai International Peace Convention, bringing together Sunni, Shia, Christian, Jewish, Buddhist, and Hindu theologians, this annual summit addresses topics from religiously motivated violence to environmental stewardship. Working groups draft joint statements, e.g., a 2019 Covenant for the Earth, but lack binding enforcement, raising questions about real-world impact. The Yale IJCF, Interreligious Justice and Common Future Alliance, a collaboration between Western universities and Middle Eastern seminaries that co-develop curricula on human rights. Ūlamāʼ co-teach with secular ethicists, modeling a shared epistemology that integrates revelation and reason in addressing war, poverty, and climate change. The Global Council of Muslim Scholars, GCMS. Founded in 2001, the GCMS aggregates voices from Al-Azhar, Qom, and Medina, issuing fatwas on biotechnology, finance, and digital ethics. Their 2017 edict on artificial intelligence called for human dignity above code, yet implementation remains uneven across regions. Virtual Shura platforms, leveraging blockchain for transparent deliberation, platforms like ShuraNet convene scholars asynchronously. Each issues position papers, votes on resolutions, and comments on others' reasoning. While touted as democratic, digital divides and language barriers sometimes skew participation toward English-speaking, well-resourced institutions. Coalition response. In 2020, a coalition of 120 ulama from 40 countries co-signed the Faith Leaders' Call to Action on COVID-19, urging mask-wearing, vaccination, and care for vulnerable communities. Their unified message cut through conspiracy theories, saving lives. Lessons learned. Success hinged on pre-existing trust networks, rapid digital translation, and collaboration with health experts. Yet skeptics noted the absence of grassroots dissemination plans. Religious edicts issued at high levels sometimes faltered at village mosques, lacking internet or trained staff. Geopolitical tug-of-war. Just as national governments vie to influence domestic scholars, global councils face pressure from state actors seeking soft power. A conference hosted by one government may subtly exclude critics, while funding streams can skew agendas toward donor priorities, compromising candid discourse on contentious issues like human rights abuses. Cultural imperialism versus local context. Universal declarations risk imposing norms that clash with diverse cultural practices. A consensus on bioethics crafted by scholars in Europe and North America may overlook vital perspectives from sub-Saharan, Southeast Asian, or Amazonian communities, thus replicating the very hegemony interfaith initiatives aim to transcend. True interreligious and global scholarly collaboration requires humility, the willingness to relinquish absolute epistemic authority and embrace provisional knowledge. When ulama enter these networks, they must see themselves not as triumphant ambassadors of doctrine, but as learners at the feet of shared human dilemma. Only such epistemic humility can yield robust, context-sensitive manifests that guide believers through an age of global interdependence. In an age of endless information, ulama race to harness technology, machine translation, AI-driven fatwa bots, and automated sermon generators to spread their interpretations faster than ever. Yet, as algorithms mediate scripture, does divine wisdom risk becoming code? Today, we explore how these tools can both amplify marginalized voices and concentrate influence in unseen ways, shaping whose interpretation defines Islam's public face. Breaking language barriers. Tools like Google Translate and specialized Quran rendering engines allow scholars to publish in dozens of languages within hours. A khutbah delivered in Arabic can appear in Swahili, Urdu, and Indonesian nearly instantaneously, reaching remote communities and diaspora alike. This linguistic democratization empowers non-Arabic speakers to engage directly with primary texts, yet automated nuance sometimes mangles complex theological terms, risking misinterpretation. Community-curated glossaries. Progressive networks compile glossaries with context-rich definitions for key terms, taqwa, jihad, khilafah, to train neural models. However, whose definitions prevail in these glossaries? Dominant institutions can bias AI outputs toward their doctrinal slant, effectively coding theology with ideological preferences. Chatbot muffed. Several startups and academic labs experiment with AI semi-scholars that answer user queries on everyday matters, dietary laws, banking, social etiquette. Trained on corpora of classical juristic texts, these bots provide 24/7 guidance. They offer consistency and speed, but lack the moral nuance, rhetorical tact, and accountability of living scholars. When a user follows a bot's edict, who bears responsibility? The machine, the programmer, or the original jurists whose texts were parsed? Hybrid review models. Some platforms combine AI drafts with human scholar review. Scholars validate or amend algorithmic answers before publication. This synergy can streamline workflow, but time-poor scholars may rubber-stamp AI outputs, eroding rigorous vetting and reducing ʿilm to an exercise in curation rather than creation. Template theology. Emerging services offer sermon templates. Insert today's date, select a theme, mercy, justice, charity, and receive a ready-to-deliver khutbah with hadith citations and rhetorical flourishes. Mosques struggling for qualified speakers embrace these tools, yet reliance on generic templates risks homogenizing preaching. Vast congregations hear the same sermon logic recycled globally, stifling local relevance and spiritual authenticity. Local customization plugins. To counter this, developers create plugins that integrate community data, weather alerts, local news, social issues, into sermon drafts. Even so, algorithmic assembly lines can outpace genuine pastoral care, leaving congregants with polished speeches but no real engagement with their lived realities. Blockchain credentials, projects, pilot blockchain-based ijaza certifications, immutable records of a scholar's learning lineage, course completions, and peer endorsements. Tokens grant access to exclusive study groups. This can disrupt closed guilds, empowering independent researchers. However, blockchain permanence also freezes reputations. Early errors or youthful mistakes are eternally recorded, complicating scholarly growth and forgiveness. Smart contract, Shura. Proposals for smart contracts that automatically convene jurists when a critical mass of community queries arises. Gas fees, fund honoraria, and voted resolutions trigger publication. Theoretically democratic, these systems risk majority tyranny and neglect minority perspectives, echoing classical concerns about ijma's potential to silence dissent. Technology promises to flatten hierarchies, yet all too often replicates existing power structures in digital form. As ʿulamāʼ chase global reach through algorithms, they confront a paradox. Divine speech delivered through mechanical channels can amplify both liberation and control. The real test lies in ensuring that gadgets serve guidance, not gatekeeping, maintaining human wisdom at the core of every byte and blockchain block. We've traced the rise, the funding, the networks, and the technologies of today's ʿulamāʼ. Now we stand before the ultimate question: who guards the guardians when they look into their own reflections? When the scholar's verdict becomes the laity's law, where does conscience dwell? In this finale, we abandon blueprints and codes, turning instead to the silent dialogue between heart and text, and asking, can true scholarship survive its own power? Every fatwa carries ripples across generations. Today's verdict on family, finance, or freedom may echo in lives unimagined, yet the scholar whose pen wields such force often remains unseen, untouched by consequence. This gulf between impact and accountability breeds a silent corroding of trust. When guidance brings harm, where does restitution lie? The prophet taught that the best of you is he who remembers God in private. Authentic scholarship must begin in solitude, where the heart wrestles with doubt before delivering certainty. But in public platforms and media glare, doubt vanishes. The challenge is preserving that inner wrestle, ensuring that every ruling is haunted by the question, am I speaking for God or for my own ambition? Digital archives keep sermons alive long after their contexts fade. A speech on medieval jurisprudence reverberates in modern courts, ill-suited to its frame. Scholars crave legacy, but when once living words calcify into dogma, they imprison fresh insight. True knowledge grows like a tree, dogma stands like a statue. Across continents, ʿulamāʼ preach in 50 dialects, follow dozens of madahib, and answer millions of personal queries. Such diversity can be a chorus of mercy or a cacophony that fractures the ummah. The scholar's task is to navigate these currents, to affirm pluralism without descending into relativism, to hold tradition without becoming its slave. It is tempting to despair, to see ūlamā as merchants of certitude, selling absolutes in a fluid world. Yet even in the darkest tide, conscience flickers. The real revolution may not lie in new councils or algorithms, but in each scholar's quiet choice to let humility, not hubris, anchor every interpretation. When the ūlamā reclaim the inner dialogue, allowing doubt its place, listening to the laity's lived wisdom, and embracing scholarship as service, they become mirrors of the divine, reflecting guidance without shading the soul's freedom. Authority without self-examination becomes tyranny. Tradition without introspection becomes tombstone. My hope is that every scholar, in the privacy of dawn's first light, hears the whisper of their own conscience louder than any standing ovation. For it is in that inner sanctuary, where doubt and devotion converge, that true ʿilm survives. If the ūlamā can guard that sacred space, then the ummah will find its way not through decrees etched in stone, but through living scripture written in every heart.